It's wonderful to be here. I was talking to somebody a little bit earlier, about 5 years ago. I remember going to a business breakfast that the Economic Development Agency had run, and it was about economic development in Canterbury. And the focus was on pumping more water on the Canterbury Plains and putting on more dairy cows. And I came away thinking the future of New Zealand has to be technology. It has to be using our brains rather than a natural resource. So it's wonderful to see so many people at the Tech Summit this year. It's just superb to see that. Today I'd like to tell some stories, mostly about where the company has come from and a little bit about where we're going. We have identified a niche in the market for certain products, and I'll be focusing in on that niche and how we're going about creating products for that niche. This isn't a technical talk, so if you're interested in any code samples or academic formula, this is not the right place for you. The snakes and ladders, I was thinking about this talk and thinking about the typical journey of a tech company who's innovating new products and innovating products into new markets and the typical ups and downs. And then I also thought about the medical aspect of what we do and how the medical symbol, the staff of Asclepius, has got a snake curled around it. So the idea, that metaphor of snakes and ladders seemed quite appropriate. I will say this is a talk about a healthcare company, and the area we do focus in is wound care. So there are a couple of photos of wounds, so if you are concerned about that, just be aware to look away from the screen. I did choose particularly ungory images, so it should be okay. The talk will be in 3 parts. The middle section is talking about some of the history of the company and the products that we've created. The last part will be talking about opportunities for in New Zealand and Christchurch in specific for the healthcare space. But the first part of the talk I wanted to just focus in on the market segment that we've identified. So information is pervasive, so everyone has access to the internet. The Internet of Things is becoming a reality, and I would be very surprised if there's many people here that don't have a smartphone in their pocket. So imagine that your father, say a relative of yours, your father develops a wound and he goes to the hospital. You would expect that the hospital would be using some modern technology to be identifying what was wrong with that wound, working out the optimal therapy for that wound, and helping in that diagnostic process. Perhaps a medical scanner, some device that would be used that would help to diagnose and analyze that wound. Well, technology in wound care has bypassed that field. The processes that are used in wound care are the same as was used 20, 30, 40, 50 years ago. There really has not been any adoption of new technology to assist in that process. A wound is often measured with a disposable paper ruler. The dimensions of the wound are measured. And this one I love, the cotton bud. It's stuck in the wound to measure the depth of the wound. Imagine this is a very painful, potentially infected wound. So here we have a patient with a wound and is being prodded with a cotton bud. Perhaps they want to measure the area of the wound. So the standard of care until recently, until we developed our solution, was an acetate sheet that was placed on the patient's body, and the outline of the wound was drawn and the size was calculated from that. Maybe the images were taken on a camera or a mobile phone. Those images were not placed into the chart of the patient. It was all done on paper, and it still is all done on paper. So what you're seeing on the screen here is standard of care for wound care around the world. So you might say, well, it's wound care. That can't be too significant. Well, some numbers. 2% of the population at any time has wounds. That's 7 million people in the United States. The United States is our main market, and I'll focus on numbers from the United States. There's no exact cost of how much is spent, but it's estimated that $50 billion is spent each year treating wounds. And you can see from the previous slide the standard of care. There's tremendous inefficiencies in the in the way that care is provided, lack of consistency in the assessments, a lack of evidence in terms of defining the best therapies, and very ad hoc treatment. Coupled with that, incidence of wounds is increasing with the aging of the population and the increase of diabetes. That's just driving more wounds, the incidence of wounds. And diabetes is particularly troublesome because if a diabetic wound gets infected, that can lead to amputation, and so that's a severe quality of life issue for the patient. And finally, the issue is global. It's across all boundaries. So when we put all of these things together, there was a need in the market for better solutions. There was a large potential market and an opportunity for us. We set our minds to developing a solution. What I'm going to do now is change a little bit and go back in history and just give some insight as to where ARANZ came from and how we ended up creating the wound care solution that I'll be describing soon. A few in the audience, perhaps only a very few, will recognise this person. This is Professor Richard Bates. He was a leading figure in the Department of Electrical Engineering here in Canterbury in the 70s and 80s. He had very diverse research interests from radio astronomy, optical astronomy, speech processing. He even published papers on the structure of DNA. Very widely published person. But one of his areas of interest was medical imaging. And I don't know how many people here know, but in the 1970s, CT, computer tomography, the medical imaging modality, was invented here in Christchurch by this gentleman and a PhD student of his called Terry Peters. Unfortunately for New Zealand's recognition, Sir Godfrey Hounsfield invented CT and published it independently, but published it before the team here in New Zealand. So the recognition and the Nobel Prize went to Sir Godfrey Hounsfield. But the team here continued to develop this product, and I received these slides from Terry Peters. This is an operational CT that was working in Christchurch Hospital in 1975. It's the gantry here. They put a phantom on, the torso, and reconstructed. This was before the image was calibrated, so you can see crudely the idea of a torso here. But on the right side of the screen, you can see the top image is a sheep bone, and the bottom image is the first reconstruction they did from their calibrated device of this. So this is one of the very first CT images ever created in the world, and that was done here in Christchurch in our local hospital in the mid-70s. I did present this slide in Wellington a few weeks ago, and I did get some comments about being a one-eyed Cantabrian, that I was promoting the innovation in Canterbury and Christchurch, and how New Zealand and Canterbury had been ahead of things. But Professor Bates has had a tremendous influence on things. So the MARS project, the Mars Bioimaging project, is following this tradition, the multispectral CT that was created by Richard Bates. So where did the company I work for, ARANZ Medical, start? Well, in the early 1990s, two PhD graduates from Richard Bates's graduates were on postdoc in London, and were having, as you would, a beer in Hyde Park one sunny Saturday afternoon, and they came up at this time with the idea of a handheld laser scanner. Of course, the beer helped. That always stimulates the thoughts, and that laser scanner idea was originated from this. And I think Bruce McCallum, one of the two individuals, Bruce and Rick Fright, Bruce is here somewhere at the event today. This photo really amuses me because if you look carefully in the background, you can see the Syrian and Jordanian flags. So there was obviously some Arab protests going on in the background, but you can see our two intrepid engineers were so focused on what they were doing, they were oblivious to the protest behind them. So Bruce and Rick came back to New Zealand and with two others started a company that commercialized the laser scanner that they had conceived. And this is how do I get this? Okay, how do I get the movie to play? So there's a movie here. This is the first scanner was taken up to Wellington to Weta Digital, and this is on the set of Lord of the Rings. The scanner was used to scan the clay models of the objects, in this case the cave troll, and was then that three-dimensional shape was fed to the animation software to be brought to life. And this is the model on the big screen. So unfortunately, the movie hasn't played, but you would have seen as they scanned it, it would be building up in real time the three-dimensional structure of the clay model. The company at the time was focused on the animation space. And so here's another individual that you may recognize being scanned by the scanner. Can we have some sound on this? This is for...
Let's scan me. I'm ready. I'm ready. Where am I going to get scanned? Right there. This doesn't look good, so MTV, make sure y'all rolling for the insurance claim. It's a scan. They use it to suck money out of the budget. Yes. No, don't use it.
It's for you to, for a CG version of you in the hover pod flying around.
Right, yeah, like when they do a CG thing and I'm flying around and like I get maybe far away and they can't make out my features anymore, they can actually put them in. Wow. Technology is ridiculous. Okay, cool. He's really great at what he does. Thank you, sir.
So that was on the film set of Men in Black at the time. So the company, we sold 15 scanners to the movie houses, but where was the money? I mean, once we'd sold those 15 units, we'd saturated that market. So we had a multi-purpose scanner, which would capture images from various objects, but where the company really got its foothold was in the prosthetics and orthotics market. So this is custom fit prosthetics, where an amputee, the residual limb is molded in plaster of Paris. That plaster of Paris is then used to create the artificial limb. So with the scanner, we could have a very clean and effective way of scanning the limb. So there's a US company, Hanger, that purchased a number of these, and this really got the company flying, the sale of those products to that company. I don't have any slides here, but some people in the audience may be familiar with the company ARANZ Geo. So at this time, the company also created the Leapfrog product and eventually spun out ARANZ Geo as a completely separate entity. Some of the technology that was used in the scanner formed the basis for some of the modeling that's done as still part of the Leapfrog product. So how did we pivot to wound care? Well, about 10 years ago, one of our customers, researchers at Wake Forest University in North Carolina, and these are the people who invented the negative pressure, the VAC system, approached us and said, wouldn't it be great to use your product in our wound care research? And so that got us thinking and investigating, and that's where we came up with that analysis that I showed near the beginning of the presentation. Could we have a system that would measure the wounds, non-contact, and I have to say we were shocked at the Stone Age standard of care that was in presence at the time, that was used at the time in wound care. So we developed this product. This is our first generation of wound care system. It was a PDA, and into that the compact flash port slotted a camera that we developed that uses lasers to generate the three-dimensional shape of the body. And you can see it being used to measure a wound patient there. And with that, we're able to track the healing process of the wound over time, take a temporal series of images and show the healing of the wound over time. And this really took us into the digital age. We now could have electronic documentation, the wounds, images, and the graphs of healing and other notes. And also, it allowed us to integrate into existing information management systems that the hospital may have. So we created a system, a web-based system where all of the information was gathered and shared with the hospital information system. Somewhat amusingly, the US media reported this as the tricorder for wound care. So there were a number of different articles went out talking about a tricorder for wound care. So this was the first generation of the product. We then moved to the second generation of the product, and this was driven partly by the PDA becoming obsolete, but also we had some improvements in the technology. And this is the second generation of the product that we designed. So this allowed us to track the wounds, to be able to show that the wounds were healing more quickly. It allowed us to treat the caregivers to treat patients in the community, and really overall reduced the cost of care. I'm going to show a short video now, which talks about the Silhouette product suite and some of the clinical benefits and economic benefits for our customers.
The Silhouette product suite enables efficient collection of electronic wound assessment information, including images, measurements, and clinical notes. Information is integrated from the point of care to an organization's patient record system. Wound information is collected using the point of care devices, Silhouette Star and Silhouette Connect. Information is then synchronized to Silhouette Central, the central database that manages collected wound information. Silhouette is transforming wound care practice, enabling better evidence-based decisions and support to those responsible for delivering and improving the quality of patient care. Such informed decisions lead to clinical and financial efficiencies in wound care.
Great, so that gives a bit of an overview. I just also wanted to focus in on some clinical users who are using the product and the difference it is making in the lives of individuals. On the left, we have the system being used by the NHS in the UK, and this is helping them in the care of the diabetic foot patients. I mentioned before the amputation issue if wounds are infected, so they're very focused on tracking those wounds and making sure they're healed well. The middle slide I'm actually going to talk about separately. It's actually a young child in Ghana who's being evaluated with our system. And on the right, we have a patient, John, and his caregiver, Sarah. And this is in Wellington. And John, if you asked him, he would say Silhouette saved his life. So John developed a sacral wound, and that wound was not healing. And every time the person who came to John's house, it was often a different person. And so John, by using Silhouette, was able to firstly see the image of the wound, because he wasn't able to see it previously, and become kind of the center point of his care, and Silhouette gave him the power to do that. In terms of our customers, almost all of our customers are international, and the US is our main market. The two organizations I've highlighted are the Department of Veterans Affairs and the NHS. They're the two biggest healthcare providers in both the US and the UK. Also, top 20 4 of the top 20 global pharmaceutical companies are customers. So now I just wanted to give a few reflections on what being a medical device company is and the potential opportunities for medical device companies. I guess part of this is me trying to plant the seed for entrepreneurs in our midst to get into the space in Canterbury and start building an ecosystem of medical or health technology companies in the Christchurch area. So where are the opportunities? Well, firstly, and this is a pretty obvious statement, but all patients will always become ill. So there's always a need for healthcare. And in different countries, that need may differ, but there's always a need for better care. And it's really it's universal across all ages, across all countries. There's always going to be a need for healthcare. The next thing is that the population is increasing. If on the graphic you can see, I think it's the World Health Organization, graphics of the growth in the global population. So the population is increasing, but also the population is aging. This is data from Korea. I chose Korea because it has a particularly dramatic increase in the percentage of aging of the population. So you can see it's now just above 13% of the population is above 65, and by 2060 it's going to be about 40% of the population. And so you can imagine the enormous stress this is going to put on a healthcare system, the cost pressure, the resourcing to be able to care for these patients. And so there's a tremendous opportunity to provide better, more cost-effective care, more efficient care, and that's really what our driver has been over the last few years. And this is kind of what gets me up in the morning. It's a chance to make a huge impact on people's lives. So I mentioned this photo. This is the same photo I had previously. This is in a clinic in Ghana, and the doctor is part of a World Health Organization program that's looking for a therapy for Buruli ulcer. So Buruli ulcer is a very close relative of leprosy, and children are particularly susceptible, and it's waterborne. And so a child, if they get this disease, develops lesions, and this is the least gruesome of the photos I could find, which basically waste away the tissues. And so it's enormously motivating to know that your product is being used in this case in West Africa, to develop or to identify a therapy that can really transform the lives of these children. And if you go on our website, our tagline is, we say we're helping people to heal people. So we're developing technologies and solutions that help people heal people. The next kind of reflection is, what's the driver for customers? And I guess when we first started into this, we made a few mistakes, which I'll talk about. And actually, that's one of the things I did want to say early. I discovered a few days ago that this is being recorded, and so I'm staying away from any commercial sensitive information. So we've got a whole new range of products that are coming out that I'm not actually going to talk about just from a commercial point of view. And I also don't want to get into too many specifics about customers. But healthcare is a business, and this is particularly true in the United States. It's all about the money. It's not, I mean, this is harsh to say, but in the United States, it's not about the patient, it's all about the money. So to be successful, you need to understand where is the money flowing. You're selling a product, you're asking for money for a service. So how is the organization that you're presenting that to, how is the money flowing? How are they going to get reimbursement? How are they going to reduce their costs? And my last bullet point, there has to be a financial incentive for the purchaser. And I have to say we got this wrong initially. We had this product. We knew from talking to key opinion leaders that our product was saving costs. It was just driving costs out of the healthcare system by getting patients healed more quickly. But the problem we faced was we were going and selling this to the hospital. And the hospital was being paid on a fee-for-service model. So the hospital was happy every week for the patient to come in, they got their wound dressing, they got charged $150, they left, they came back the next week. So from a hospital which is trying to grow its revenue, there was no incentive. In fact, there was a negative incentive to use our product. So we had to find hospitals where that model was different, and we had to find other organizations where there was an incentive. Fortunately, in the time we've been working, Obamacare has come in the US, and there's now financial penalties for organizations, healthcare organizations, that don't track the patient and can't prove that the patient is healing. So some learnings there. You really do need to know where the money flows and how your customer is going to make money. Another reflection is hardware versus software. And in the blue bullet point, I once really struck me when I heard Sir Peter Gluckman say it's much easier to export electrons than atoms. So should we be in the software business? Should we be in the hardware business? So in our organization, we think of ourselves as a software company, but we do hardware. We create great hardware, and that gives us a competitive advantage. But where there's third-party hardware that's available, we will use it. And I'll just comment that as an organization, our spend in software is significantly greater than in hardware. And the final point I'll make here, and I commented on this earlier, we have a whole bunch of new products that are coming out over the next 2 or 3 months. I'm not going to talk about them in this forum, but if anyone is interested, I'll be very happy to talk with people in a more confidential setting. The next comment is healthcare. It's a regulated business, and it's a highly regulated business. To sell your products into different markets, you have to go through the certification process. So don't underestimate it, the effort you've got to go through to be able to sell products into international markets around the world, but also don't overestimate it. So often there's ways of doing things quite efficiently. So be aware that you need to do this, but don't let it put you off at least finding out what's involved. We actually found the FDA process for our product actually quite reasonable. Some of the others were a bit more challenging and a bit more expensive, but the FDA process was actually quite reasonable. The next comment, it always takes longer than you imagine. The product development takes longer, market development takes longer, customer evaluation and sales takes longer. I'll give an example here, the Department of Veterans Affairs in the United States. We first started working with them about 8 years ago, and we've sold a good number of systems. I think we've sold to 20 of their 160 hospitals now, but we're just on the threshold of a much bigger leap, and that's because we're going through a national approval process, which has taken a number of years, and it's taken quite a bit of back and forward for them to understand what their internal process is to allow us to get that approval. So it takes longer than you think. There's no question about that. The final slide is just what's happening in Canterbury, and this is related to what I said earlier. It'd be great to, and I think there already is, I think there's more than 20 companies active in the health technology space here in Christchurch. I've got a few of them listed on the screen here. Most of these companies you might not have heard of. Many of them are flying under the radar. Many of them are focused on international markets, and we heard Andy talk about the opportunities in international markets compared to the very small New Zealand market. I'd also comment that we do have an innovative DHB, maybe not always the easiest to work with, but certainly they are recognised as being very innovative. And so I'd encourage any entrepreneurs out there, find the nation and go and tackle it. So we had spoken earlier in the presentation about the awards. We've got some of them listed on the left, some of the successes we've had in the last 2 years or so. And I'd also like to acknowledge NZTE, and we've had great support from them over the years, Callaghan Innovation, and also Christchurch NZ. It's a little known fact, but Christchurch NZ also was quite influential in ARANZ. We received a grant from them in the very early days that got the company off the ground. So thank you.